start the webinar today by spending some time to set the scene and provide you with some insights into the thinking and behaviours that we may well see as we start to establish the new norms of living and working in the 21st century. There's no getting away from the profound effect that COVID-19 pandemic has had upon our lives, at home, at work and at play. We are all very aware of the huge number of people who've either lost their job, been furloughed, or had their income drastically reduced. For many people, 2020 has been about being forced to work from home and coping with all of the additional pressures of juggling with childcare, homeschooling, work, and looking after the home and the family. But we must also remember that there is a large number of people who could not work from home. And all through the pandemic, even when the number of infection rates and hospitalizations and sadly deaths were going off the charts, some people had to continue going to work to provide those essential services for the rest of us. They were putting their lives at risk to help protect, feed and care all of us. But how did that feel for them? What was going on for them? How was the pressure impacting upon them? The whole nation, and indeed throughout the world, people were worried about their health, the health of their family and friends, the economy, the security of their jobs, the immediate income, the long-term effects of the pandemic, and so the list goes on. At Jigsaw Discovery, we work with people, helping them to understand more about themselves and their behaviours. We help people to understand more about the way they think about and react to stressful situations. And this has provided us with insights to help individuals and organisations as they begin to unlock and adapt to the changes that COVID-19 has brought about, both at work and more generally in our everyday lives. To help set the scene, I want to share with you some key findings of some research that was carried out at the end of last year, actually, by the Myers-Briggs company. And they looked at the relationship between an individual's behavioural preferences and their perception of living and working during the pandemic. And I've just picked out some of the kind of highlights that hopefully will set the scene for today. When the people taking part in the research were asked to describe their feelings about COVID-19, as you may expect, they were mostly negative. Although a few people did respond with more positive words, such as optimistic and hope and opportunity. According to the research, the possibility of the economy going into recession was by far the biggest concern. When people were asked more specifically, however, about their working lives, many people tended to give a more positive response. This was especially true in the case of people who were working remotely, but also applied to a large number of the non-remote workers. The conclusion was that people felt more negative about the wider concerns of the pandemic than they did about their day-to-day lived experiences. They were more concerned about the bigger picture of the pandemic and how it was affecting others. They were also feeling increased levels of stress. But generally speaking, those who were in work felt positive about their jobs. Now, this could be linked to the fact that the big picture was unknown and out of the individual's control, whereas with their jobs, they felt they had possibly a little bit more control. People working from home tended to view the situation more positively than the non-remote workers. The concerns of people who continued to go into the workplace expressed increased concerns about their family, friends, co-workers. And this can be explained by the fact that they were not able to isolate in the same way that the people who were working from home could do. Behavioural preferences had a significant impact upon people's responses. People with more feeling preference tended to have more negative views than people with a preference for thinking. To a lesser extent, the same was true of people with a sensing preference compared to those with a preference for intuition. And when asked about remote working, it was people with a more extrovert preference who expressed more negative views than the introverts. When asked about remote working, most people appreciated being able to work from home. However, people with a preference for extroversion reported being more likely to miss the contact with other people and found that working from home was too quiet for them, to the point that they actually became quite concerned about becoming too isolated. They also actually reported watching more TV and Netflix than they did prior to the pandemic. It was found that with people with a preference for sensing were significantly more concerned than people with a preference for intuition. And some of the things they were more concerned about were managing their levels of motivation, having children at home for extended periods of time, being able to manage their own stress levels, and actually finding it quite difficult to stay focused whilst working from home. Whereas people with a preference for intuition actually reported feeling more motivated, and they were actually enjoying the peace and quiet of working from home. People with a higher preference for feeling were more likely to use negative and emotive words when talking about their feelings for the pandemic. They expressed significantly more concern about managing motivation, conflict, and their level of stress. They were also worried about their productivity whilst working from home, and their relationship with their spouse or partner was also of some concern to them. Overall, they were significantly less appreciative about working from home and found it hard to be engaged, and were much less positive about using the virtual tools than people who had a higher preference for thinking. It was also people who had a preference for feeling who were the most likely to feel guilty about having a job when so many other people had lost theirs or been furloughed. And just to kind of conclude this section, the opening scene setting section, an observation noted about the research was that the people who responded later to the survey, and I think this survey was conducted from between May to September, October last year, but the people who responded later to the survey expressed more frustration and anger about the situation in comparison to the early respondents. Therefore, it may be possible to conclude that the levels of frustration and anger employees are feeling is on the increase. And this could be an important insight to factor into discussions and plans when thinking about if and when and how people will return to the workplace. I hope that you'll agree that the research has highlighted some important and interesting insights into how people have been experiencing and perceiving the last 12 months. Insights which will help leaders to make informed choices about the way to start unlocking our workspaces and building the future of work. One of the important factors which we need to take into account is that, generally speaking, leaders tend to have a higher preference for thinking than feeling. And so, based on the insights provided by the research, leaders may find it really quite a stretch to truly understand and be able to relate to the way their employees, their colleagues have actually experienced and perceived the last 12 months.